Maid removed a billionaire's watch to save him. What happened next shocked all. Eleanor Hayes had cleaned exactly 247 marble tiles in the East Wing corridor when she noticed the tremor in Mr. Blackwood's hand. She'd been working at the Blackwood estate for 6 months now, and in that time, she'd learned to move like a ghost through the sprawling mansion. Invisible. Silent. Exactly how James Blackwood preferred his staff to be. At 28, Eleanor had perfected the art of being present without being seen, a skill honed through years of housekeeping jobs that helped her send money back to her younger sister in Ohio. James Blackwood, at 34, was a fortress of a man. Tech billionaire. Venture capitalist. A name whispered in boardrooms with equal parts admiration and fear. But here, in his own home, he was simply a shadow moving through expensive rooms, his jaw eternally set in a hard line, his steel-gray eyes looking through people rather than at them. The other staff whispered about him during cigarette breaks in the garden. About how his fiancée had betrayed him 5 years ago, selling company secrets for a competitor's money. About how his business partner, his college roommate, had embezzled millions before disappearing. About how trust had been systematically extracted from James Blackwood like teeth, one painful betrayal at a time. Eleanor understood betrayal. She understood what it meant to build walls so high that sunlight couldn't reach your heart anymore. It was 2:47 p.m. when she saw him in the library, and something was wrong. James sat in his leather chair, the afternoon light cutting harsh shadows across his face. His hand, the one holding his phone, was shaking. Not the slight tremor of too much coffee, but something deeper. More concerning. His breathing had changed too, shallow and quick. Eleanor knew she should leave. That was the unspoken rule. Mr. Blackwood's private moments were exactly that, private. But she'd seen this before. Her father had been a proud man too. Stubborn. Silent about his pain until the day his heart gave out in their kitchen, his daughter helplessly performing CPR while waiting for ambulances that arrived too late. Eleanor's feet moved before her mind could overrule them. Mr. Blackwood? Her voice felt too loud in the cathedral-like silence of the library. His head snapped up, those gray eyes turning to ice. I don't recall requesting your presence. Sir, are you feeling all right? You look pale. I'm fine. The words came out clipped, final. A door slamming shut. Return to your duties. But he wasn't fine. As Eleanor watched, his jaw clenched tighter, a small muscle jumping beneath his skin. His left hand moved to his chest, just for a moment, before he caught himself and dropped it. Pride. She recognized it like an old friend. Mr. Blackwood, I think. I don't pay you to think, Ms. Hayes. I pay you to clean. Now leave before I have Mrs. Patterson dock your wages for insubordination. The words were meant to wound, to establish distance. Eleanor had heard worse from better people. She turned as if to go, her cleaning cart squeaking slightly. Then she heard it, a soft, almost inaudible gasp of pain. When she turned back, James Blackwood's composure had cracked. His face was ashen now, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. His hand clutched the arm of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Eleanor made her decision in a heartbeat. She crossed the room in 6 quick steps, her phone already in her hand. I'm calling 911. Don't you dare. His voice was weaker now, the command lacking its usual edge. I said I'm fine. You're having a heart attack, Mr. Blackwood. Or something very close to it. Eleanor was already dialing, her nurse's training from community college, 2 years completed before her father's medical bills had forced her to drop out, kicking in like muscle memory. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Even in distress, his grip was strong. No hospitals. No ambulances. Do you understand? I don't need the media circus. The stock price is tanking, the board questioning my health. What you need, Eleanor interrupted, meeting those ice-cold eyes with her own steady gaze, is to not die on a Tuesday afternoon because you're too stubborn to accept help. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. No one spoke to James Blackwood this way. The moment an ambulance pulls up to this estate, it'll be on social media. The moment I'm admitted to a hospital, it's breaking news. Do you understand what that means for a company valued at $12 billion? Each word seemed to cost him effort now. Eleanor understood. She also understood that money meant nothing if you were dead. Then we go quietly, she said, her mind already racing through options. My car. The ER entrance. I'll register you under a different name until we know what we're dealing with. You'd risk your job for this? For me? The question came out almost confused, as if the concept of someone helping him without an angle was foreign. I'm risking my job by standing here arguing with you while you have a cardiac event, Eleanor shot back. Now, we can debate the philosophy of human decency, or we can get you medical attention. Your choice, Mr. Blackwood, but choose fast because you're running out of time. For a long moment, James Blackwood stared at her. Really looked at her, perhaps for the first time since she'd started working there. Then slowly he nodded. Help me up, he said quietly. Eleanor moved to his side, studying him as he rose on unsteady legs. He was taller than she'd realized, 6'3" of stubborn pride and expensive suit. Your watch, she said suddenly, her eyes catching the gleam of platinum on his wrist. A Patek Philippe. She recognized it from the luxury magazines left in the upstairs bathrooms. Worth more than she'd earn in 5 years. You need to take it off. My watch. James's voice held an edge of confusion, mixed with irritation. What possible relevance? Hospitals and emergency rooms have protocols, Eleanor explained, already reaching for the clasp with steady fingers. Jewelry comes off, especially expensive jewelry. And trust me, Mr. Blackwood, the second the ER staff sees a watch worth $500,000, every person in that hospital will know exactly who you are. So much for privacy. His eyes widened slightly, not at her boldness in touching him, but at the fact that she was right. Eleanor felt the weight of the timepiece as she unclasped it. Heavier than she expected. She'd once read that Patek Philippe watches were investments, heirlooms, markers of legacy. This particular model, with its complications and handcrafted mechanism, was probably irreplaceable. I'll keep it safe, she promised, slipping it into the zippered pocket of her uniform. Now, can you walk? I'm having a potential heart attack, not a stroke, James muttered, but he leaned on her more heavily than his pride wanted to admit. Getting him through the mansion was an exercise in stealth and prayer. They took the servants' corridors, narrow hallways Eleanor knew intimately from 6 months of invisible navigation. The irony wasn't lost on her. The billionaire who owned this palace was escaping through the passages designed to keep help like her out of sight. Where's your security team? Eleanor whispered as they passed the West Gallery. Tuesdays they rotate shifts at 3. We have 17 minutes before the evening detail arrives. Even in crisis, James Blackwood's mind worked with precision. My driver is off duty. I sent him to pick up documents from the downtown office. Convenient timing for a cardiac event, Eleanor said dryly. The ghost of a smile flickered across his pale face. The universe has always had a terrible sense of humor where I'm concerned. They made it to the staff parking area without incident. Eleanor's Honda Civic looked particularly humble next to the garage full of luxury vehicles visible through the bay windows. She helped James into the passenger seat, adjusting it back to accommodate his long legs. When's the last time you were in a car that wasn't German or Italian? She asked, turning the ignition. I honestly can't remember. His breathing was still labored, but some color had returned to his face. Though I believe my first car was a Ford Taurus. 2008, bought it used. Eleanor glanced at him as she pulled out of the estate. You remember your first car? I remember everything before the money, James said quietly, his hand pressed against his chest. Sometimes I think those memories are the only real things I have left. The drive to Mercy General took 19 minutes. Eleanor drove with practiced calm, keeping conversation minimal, monitoring James's condition from the corner of her eye. She'd chosen Mercy General deliberately, a good hospital, but not the elite private facility where billionaires typically received care. More anonymous. More human. What's your mother's maiden name? Eleanor asked as they pulled into the parking lot. Harper. Why? Because in about 3 minutes, you're going to be James Harper, age 34, experiencing chest pains. Insurance? We'll say you're between jobs. They'll still treat you, but the VIP treatment squad won't descend. James looked at her with something approaching wonder. You've done this before. Not exactly this, Eleanor admitted, helping him out of the car. But I've navigated the healthcare system enough times to know how it works. Sometimes you need to hide in plain sight to get actual care instead of spectacle. The ER was moderately busy enough that one more patient didn't draw excessive attention, not so packed that they'd face dangerous delays. Eleanor guided James to registration with a hand on his elbow, steady and sure. The intake nurse, a tired-looking woman named Brenda according to her badge, barely looked up. Name? James Harper. Eleanor answered when James hesitated. He's having chest pains, shortness of breath, sweating. Started about 40 minutes ago. Brenda's eyes sharpened, her professional instincts kicking in. Any history of heart disease? Is he on any medications? Eleanor looked at James, who seemed oddly lost. For a man who commanded boardrooms and made decisions worth millions, he appeared completely disarmed by this ordinary moment of human vulnerability. No heart disease, he managed. No medications. But my father died of a heart attack at 41. That changed everything. Within minutes, James was in a wheelchair being rushed to an examination room. Eleanor moved to follow, but a different nurse, younger, more officious, stopped her. Family only beyond this point. I'm his, Eleanor started, then saw James's hand raise weakly. She's my wife, he said, the lie coming out smooth despite his labored breathing. Please. I need her with me. The nurse's expression softened. Of course. Follow me, Mrs. Harper. Mrs. Harper. Eleanor should have corrected him. Should have explained. But something in James's eyes, a flash of genuine fear beneath all that ice, kept her silent. The examination room was sterile, fluorescent lit, smelling of antiseptic and fear. They hooked James up to an EKG machine, took blood, started in 4. Eleanor stood in the corner, trying to be unobtrusive, watching as layers of the fearsome James Blackwood were stripped away to reveal just a frightened man. You didn't have to say that, Eleanor murmured when they had a moment alone between medical staff rotations. The wife thing. They wouldn't have let you stay otherwise. James's eyes were closed, his voice tired. And I didn't want to be alone. The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and raw. You're not alone, Eleanor said softly. Aren't I? James opened his eyes, and Eleanor saw something in them she hadn't expected. Not anger or suspicion, but genuine curiosity. You don't even know me, Ms. Hayes. Why are you here? What's your angle? Not everyone has an angle, Mr. Blackwood. In my experience, everyone does. Eleanor pulled a chair closer to his bedside, settling in. Then your experience has made you exceptionally sad, she said simply. Not everyone wants something from you. Some people just help. Because it's right. Because you needed it. Because someone helped them once. Or because no one helped them when they needed it most. James studied her face like he was solving a complex equation. Which is it for you? The latter, Eleanor admitted. My father had a heart attack 3 years ago. I was home, just feet away, and I didn't see the signs until it was too late. The paramedics said even 5 minutes earlier might have made a difference. I'm sorry, James said, and something in his voice suggested he actually meant it. So when I saw you in that library, looking exactly like my dad looked right before he collapsed. Eleanor's voice caught. I guess I saw a chance to rewrite the ending, even if it wasn't my story. Before James could respond, the doctor entered, a no-nonsense cardiologist named Dr. Patel who looked far too young to have the authority she clearly possessed. Mr. Harper, she began, then paused, her sharp eyes taking in details. Your watched hand suggests you wear something substantial on your left wrist, but you came in without it. Your clothes are bespoke. And despite your wife's registration claiming you're between jobs, you have the posture and hand calluses of someone who works primarily with computers, not manual labor. So, let's skip the theater, shall we? James and Eleanor exchanged glances. I don't care if you're witness protection or a celebrity or whatever requires this level of privacy, Dr. Patel continued. I care about your heart. And the good news is, you're not having a heart attack. The relief that washed over Eleanor was physical, leaving her weak-kneed. The bad news, Dr. Patel continued, is that you're experiencing severe stress-induced cardiac symptoms. Essentially, your body is screaming at you to change something, and if you don't listen, next time it might not be a warning. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. And your EKG shows abnormalities consistent with chronic stress. When's the last time you took a day off, Mr. Harper? James was quiet for a long moment. I genuinely don't remember. Section 3. The Unraveling. Dr. Patel prescribed rest, medication for blood pressure, and a stern lecture about stress management that somehow felt more intimidating than any boardroom showdown. She recommended 3 days of observation, but James negotiated down to overnight, not out of stubbornness this time, but pragmatism. 1 night could be explained. 3 days would start an avalanche of questions. They moved him to a private room, still under the name James Harper. Eleanor called the estate from the hallway, reaching Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper. Mr. Blackwood had to step out for an urgent evening meeting, Eleanor explained, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. He asked me to inform you that he'll be staying at his downtown apartment tonight. He doesn't want to be disturbed. Mrs. Patterson's silence suggested suspicion, but years of working for the ultra-rich had taught her when not to ask questions. Very well. Shall I send his overnight things to the apartment? No need. He keeps essentials there, Eleanor improvised. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. When Eleanor returned to the room, James was staring out the window at the parking lot below, and 4 lines snaking from his arm. In the harsh hospital lighting, without his armor of expensive suits and commanding presence, he looked almost ordinary. Human. Tired. You're a better liar than I expected, he said without turning around. I prefer creative truth-teller, Eleanor replied, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair. You should rest. Should I? James finally looked at her. That's what Dr. Patel said. Rest. As if I can just turn off my mind like a light switch. Can't you? Can you? He countered. Eleanor thought about her own sleepless nights, worrying about her sister's college tuition, their mother's arthritis medication, the constant calculation of dollars against days. No, she admitted. But I'm not the one hooked up to an 4 with a warning label on my heart. James smiled, a real smile, not the corporate mask Eleanor had seen in photographs. It transformed his face entirely, softening the hard edges, reaching his eyes. You're remarkably impertinent for an employee. You're remarkably stubborn for a patient, Eleanor shot back. We're even. The smile faded, replaced by something more contemplative. Why are you still here? Your shift ended hours ago. You've done your good deed. Saved the billionaire's life. You could leave, and I'd make sure you were compensated. If you try to pay me for basic human decency, I'm walking out that door right now. Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp. James held up his hands in surrender. I wasn't trying to insult you. I genuinely don't understand. People don't just help. Not without wanting something. God, that's depressing, Eleanor said softly. What happened to you to make you think that way? For a long moment, James was silent. Then, perhaps because he was exhausted, perhaps because the hospital room felt like a confessional, or perhaps because Eleanor was the first person in years who'd looked at him like he was simply a human being, he started talking. I grew up middle class, he began. Dad was an accountant. Mom taught elementary school. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. I was good at computers, like, really good. Built my first software at 16. Sold it for $50,000, which felt like all the money in the world. Eleanor listened, not interrupting, letting the story unspool. I went to MIT on scholarship. Met David there. My best friend. We were roommates, lab partners, brothers in everything but blood. We started our first company in our dorm room. Little tech startup that we were sure would change the world. James's voice carried the ghost of old enthusiasm. And it did, sort of. We sold it for $30 million when I was 25. Suddenly, I went from student loans to stupid money. That's when things changed? Eleanor asked. That's when I learned that money is a magnifying glass, James said bitterly. It makes good people better and reveals what bad people really are. My girlfriend of 3 years, Sarah, I was planning to propose. Then I discovered she'd been feeding our product secrets to a competitor. For money. She didn't need it, she came from wealth. But apparently, she wanted more. Eleanor winced. David, my best friend, my business partner. I trusted him with everything. We'd built our second company together, and it was worth hundreds of millions. Then our CFO noticed discrepancies. David had been skimming for years. Not just money, millions in development funds, investment capital, even employee pension contributions. James's hands clenched. He didn't gamble it away or waste it on vices. He methodically moved it to offshore accounts while looking me in the eye every day and calling me brother. What did you do? I prosecuted. Both of them. Sarah took a plea deal. David fought it, claimed I was framing him out of jealousy. The trial destroyed our friendship publicly. He went to prison for 8 years. James's voice was hollow. And I learned that trust is a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. So you built walls, Eleanor said quietly. Fortresses, James corrected. I hired investigators to background check everyone in my life. I compartmentalized my companies so no single person could betray me completely. I kept everyone at arm's length, employees, business partners, dates that never went past surface-level conversation. And it worked. No one could hurt me if I never let them close enough to matter. Except now you're in a hospital bed because your body is literally falling apart from the stress of living like that, Eleanor pointed out gently. James laughed, a sound without humor. Ironic, isn't it? I protected myself from everyone else and ended up my own worst enemy. Eleanor pulled her chair closer. Can I tell you something, Mr. Blackwood? After today, I think you've earned the right to call me James. James, then, Eleanor continued. What Sarah and David did to you is terrible. Genuinely awful. But you're letting them steal more than money or secrets. You're letting them steal your whole life. I'm protecting myself. You're suffocating, Eleanor interrupted. There's a difference. Protection means being cautious. What you're doing is solitary confinement with expensive furniture. James looked at her with those sharp gray eyes. And you're an expert on this? No, Eleanor admitted. But I'm an expert on loss. When my dad died, I was so angry at myself for not seeing the signs, for not saving him. I withdrew from everyone for a year. Quit school. Stopped seeing friends. Built my own walls, just smaller and cheaper than yours. What changed? My sister, Eleanor said, a genuine smile crossing her face. Hannah. She was 17 and she was falling apart because she'd lost Dad, and I'd basically disappeared too. One day she showed up at my apartment and she said, "You can be sad, or you can be alive, but you can't keep being both." James considered this. Wise sister. Annoying sister, Eleanor corrected. But she was right. So I started letting people in again. Carefully. Slowly. And, yeah, some of them disappointed me. One friend borrowed money and never paid it back. A guy I dated turned out to be married. Life is messy, and people are imperfect. Exactly my point. But some people are wonderful, Eleanor continued. Mrs. Chun in my building brings me soup when I'm sick. My coworker Marcus covers my shifts when I need to visit my mom. The barista at the coffee shop remembers I like oat milk and always draws a smiley face on my cup. Small kindnesses, James. They're everywhere if you let yourself see them. Small kindnesses don't build billion-dollar companies, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Eleanor agreed. But they build lives worth living. The room fell into contemplative silence. Outside, the hospital continued its endless rhythm. Distant beeps, overhead announcements, the squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Finally, James spoke. The watch. What? My watch. You asked me to remove it and I didn't think twice. That watch is worth more than most people earn in years. You could have pocketed it, walked away, and I'd never have known until it was too late. James's eyes met hers. But you didn't. You saved my life, protected my privacy, lied to hospital staff for me, and you're sitting in that uncomfortable chair at 9 p.m. when you could be anywhere else. And you want nothing from me. I want you to rest, Eleanor said. That's something. It's the first honest thing anyone's wanted from me in years. A nurse entered to check vitals, breaking the moment. James submitted to the thermometer and blood pressure cuff with unusual patience. When they were alone again, he seemed different somehow. Softer. Tell me about your sister, he said. Hannah. Eleanor brightened. She's 23 now. Junior at Ohio State, studying environmental science. Brilliant and stubborn and way too idealistic for her own good. She wants to save the rainforests. And you're funding her education on a housekeeper's salary? Eleanor's defenses rose. We manage. That wasn't judgment, James said quickly. It was admiration. What you're doing for her, that's real. They talked through the evening, conversation flowing more easily than either expected. Eleanor told him about growing up in a small Ohio town, about her father's terrible jokes and her mother's legendary pot roast. James shared memories of his MIT days, back when the biggest worry was passing algorithms exams and finding free pizza at campus events. Around 11, Eleanor noticed James's eyes drooping. Sleep, she ordered gently. You should go home, James murmured. You've done enough. I'll stay until you're asleep. Make sure the scary hospital doesn't eat you. James smiled drowsily. The scary billionaire, afraid of hospitals. Everyone's afraid of something, Eleanor said. It just makes you human. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into sleep. Eleanor watched him for a moment, this complicated, damaged man who'd forgotten how to let anyone care about him. Then she pulled out her phone and texted her roommate that she'd be late, settled deeper into the uncomfortable chair, and kept watch through the night. Not because he paid her. Not because she wanted anything. Simply because someone should. Eleanor woke to the smell of terrible hospital coffee and James's gray eyes studying her. You stayed, he said, his voice rough with sleep and something that might have been wonder. Eleanor stretched, her neck protesting the night spent in a chair designed by sadists. Told you I would. How are you feeling? Better. Physically, anyway. James sat up slowly, looking more rested than he had in months. Emotionally, I'm processing the fact that my housekeeper, Eleanor corrected. Housekeeper, James amended with a slight smile, spent the night in a hospital chair watching over me when she could have been literally anywhere else. Well, my Tuesday night options were limited, Eleanor said dryly. It was either this or reorganizing my sock drawer. Dr. Patel arrived during morning rounds, looking slightly less exhausted than the night before. She ran through test results with clinical efficiency, but her eyes were kind when she delivered the final assessment. Your heart is structurally sound, Mr. Harper, she said, and Eleanor caught the slight emphasis on the fake name. But you're playing a dangerous game with your stress levels. The medications will help, but the real prescription is lifestyle change. Less work, more sleep, actual relaxation, not just scheduled downtime between meetings. I understand, James said. Do you? Dr. Patel challenged. Because I've seen a lot of high-powered executives in this hospital, and they all understand, right until they're back in the office, ignoring every piece of advice. Whatever you're working toward, it's not worth dying for. After she left, James was quiet for a long time. She's right, he finally said. I know she's right, but I don't know how to do what she's asking. I've been running at full speed for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to walk. Then learn, Eleanor said simply. Start small. Small how? Eleanor considered. When's the last time you ate a meal that didn't involve a business discussion or reviewing documents? James actually had to think about it. I genuinely cannot remember. Okay. Step 1. We get you discharged and you eat breakfast. Just breakfast. No phone, no laptop, no thinking about mergers or acquisitions or whatever billionaires think about. Just food and maybe a conversation about something meaningless. Meaningless conversation, James repeated, as if testing out a foreign language. I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore. It's like riding a bike, Eleanor assured him. Except the bike is small talk, and you've apparently forgotten bikes exist. Despite himself, James laughed, a real, genuine laugh that lit up his whole face. You're very strange, Eleanor Hayes. You're very damaged, James Blackwood. Eleanor shot back. We're even. The discharge process took 2 hours. Paperwork, final checks, stern instructions from Dr. Patel, and a prescription for blood pressure medication that James accepted with unusual humility. Eleanor retrieved her car while James changed back into his clothes from yesterday, slightly rumpled now, making him look oddly human. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before James spoke. Where are we going? You said breakfast. I know place. Eleanor, I should get back to the estate. There are meetings, calls I've missed. James, Eleanor interrupted gently. Did yesterday teach you nothing? Doctor's orders, rest. Which starts with breakfast. She pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's Diner, a weathered establishment that had been serving breakfast to the working class of the city for 40 years. The paint was peeling, the neon sign flickered, and it was absolutely perfect. James stared at it like it might bite him. When you said breakfast, I assumed. You assumed somewhere expensive and private where you could still check your phone between bites, Eleanor finished. But that's not the assignment. The assignment is meaningless breakfast. Come on. The diner was busy with the morning rush. Nurses ending night shifts, construction workers fueling up, elderly couples who'd probably been eating here since it opened. The clatter of dishes, the sizzle of the griddle, the warm smell of coffee and bacon, it all wrapped around them like a well-worn blanket. A waitress named Dolores, 60s, kind eyes, sensible shoes, led them to a booth with red vinyl seats that had been patched multiple times. She poured coffee without asking, her movements practiced and efficient. What'll it be, darlings? Eleanor ordered the special. James stared at the laminated menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. When's the last time you ordered from a menu without prices in French? Eleanor asked. The prices are in English, James pointed out. It's just everything is under $12, which seems impossible. Welcome to how the other 99% lives, Eleanor said. Try the pancakes. They're legendary. James ordered pancakes, and when Dolores left, he looked around the diner with genuine curiosity. You come here often? Every Sunday morning before my shift, Eleanor said. Rosie, the owner, she gave me free breakfast for a month when she found out about my dad. Wouldn't accept no for an answer. Said nobody grieves on an empty stomach, not in her diner. That's... James paused, seeming to search for words. That's remarkably kind. Small kindnesses, Eleanor reminded him. They're everywhere. The food arrived fast, stacks of golden pancakes, crispy bacon, eggs cooked exactly right. James took a tentative bite, and his eyes widened. These are incredible. I know, right? Rosie's secret is buttermilk and a tiny bit of vanilla. She taught me to cook them when I was saving up for a used car, and she let me work weekend breakfast shifts. James ate slowly, savoring each bite with an attention he probably never gave 5-star meals. I can't remember the last time I actually tasted my food, he admitted. Usually I'm eating while reading reports or taking calls. Food is just fuel. Food is joy, Eleanor corrected. Or it should be. They fell into easy conversation, the kind of meaningless, meandering talk that James had claimed to forget. Eleanor told him about Mrs. Chen's 3 cats, all named after celebrities from the 1980s. James shared a story about his first computer, a clunky desktop he'd bought with lawn mowing money. They debated the merits of Chicago versus New York pizza with the seriousness of politicians discussing foreign policy. For an hour, James Blackwood wasn't a billionaire. He was just a guy eating pancakes with a woman who made him laugh. It was only when they were leaving, James insisting on paying despite the bill being less than $30, that reality crashed back in. His phone, which he'd silently left in the car, showed 47 missed calls. Eleanor watched his expression shift, watched the walls start to rebuild themselves brick by brick. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't disappear back into that person. The one who doesn't taste his food or remember how to have a conversation. You've had a medical crisis, James. You're allowed to take one morning off. James looked at his phone, then at Eleanor, then back at his phone. The internal battle played out across his face. Then he did something that shocked them both. He turned off the phone. You're right, he said. The world can survive without me for a few more hours. It'll be good for everyone's character. Eleanor grinned. Look at you, growing already. They got back in her Honda, and Eleanor started driving, not toward the estate, but toward the waterfront park. It was a beautiful morning, crisp and clear, the kind of day that begged to be experienced rather than observed through office windows. Where are we going now? James asked, but he didn't sound upset. He sounded almost curious. I have no idea, Eleanor admitted. I'm making this up as I go. Is that okay? James considered this. It's terrifying, he said. But yes, it's okay. They walked through the park slowly, just two people among many others doing the same. Dogs chased balls. Children shrieked with laughter on playgrounds. An elderly man fed pigeons despite the signs asking him not to. I bought this park, James said suddenly. Well, not bought. But I donated the funds to renovate it 5 years ago. $10 million for new equipment, landscaping, the walking trails. I've never actually walked through it before. Why did you donate the money if you didn't care about the park? Tax write-off, James said automatically. Then paused. That's what I told myself. But honestly, I grew up near a park like this. Spent every summer playing basketball on courts that were falling apart, swings that squeaked like dying animals. I guess I wanted some other kid to have something better. Eleanor smiled. See? You're not as cold as you pretend to be. I'm not pretending, James protested. I am cold. Distant. Everyone says so. Everyone says so because you've spent years making sure they believe it, Eleanor countered. But the person who remembers his first car, who donated millions for a park, who kept his sick mother's recipe cards, that's not cold. That's someone hiding. James stopped walking. How did you know about the recipe cards? I dust your desk, remember? They're in your top drawer, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. Bread pudding, pot roast, apple pie. Your mother's handwriting. For a moment, James looked like he might retreat behind his walls again. Then something in him cracked, not broke, but opened, like a door that had been locked too long, finally getting the right key. My mother died 6 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer. I was in Tokyo closing a deal when she passed. I made it back for the funeral, but I missed her last days because I couldn't step away from negotiations. I told myself the deal was important, that she'd understand. But you've never forgiven yourself, Eleanor said softly. How could I? I chose money over the only person who loved me unconditionally. James's voice broke. After she died, I found those recipe cards in her kitchen. Every single one had notes in the margins. Jimmy's favorite, or make this for Jimmy when he's sad. Even at the end, dying, she was thinking about me. And I was thinking about stock prices. Eleanor didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she took his hand, simply, naturally, and held it as they stood together in the park his money had built but his feet had never touched. You can't change the past, Eleanor said. But you can honor her memory by actually living instead of just existing. By being the person she thought you were, the one she wrote those notes for. James squeezed her hand, and they stood like that for a long time, watching the world move around them, neither of them quite ready to let go. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond where families fed ducks in defiance of more signs. James still held Eleanor's hand, and neither of them had acknowledged it, as if speaking the gesture aloud might shatter whatever fragile thing was building between them. I need to ask you something, James said finally. And I need you to be honest with me. I'm always honest with you, Eleanor said. I know. That's what scares me. James turned to face her. Why are you doing this? And don't say because it's right, or basic human decency. I need to understand. Because in my world, people don't just care. Not without a reason. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, watching a child throw bread to enthusiastic ducks. Do you remember what I said about my father? About not seeing the signs until it was too late? Yes. What I didn't tell you was that the day he died, we'd had a fight. Stupid argument about money. He wanted to help with my tuition, and I was too proud to accept it because I knew they couldn't afford it. I said some things. He said some things. And the last words I spoke to my father were, "I don't need your help." James's hand tightened on hers. He had a heart attack 3 hours later, Eleanor continued. And those words, they're carved into my memory like stone. I don't need your help. Except I did. I needed him. And he needed me to let him be my father, to let him help, but I was too stubborn and proud to accept it. Eleanor. So when I saw you in that library, struggling, pushing everyone away, insisting you were fine when you clearly weren't, Eleanor's voice caught. I saw my father. I saw myself. I saw all the ways that pride kills us. And I thought, maybe I can't save my dad, but I can save someone else's story from ending the same way. You saved more than my story, James said quietly. You saved my life. Maybe, Eleanor said. But you're still deciding if you want to keep it. What do you mean? Eleanor gestured around them. The park, the families, the simple beauty of an ordinary Wednesday morning. You can go back to your fortress. Back to the 18-hour days and the walls and the belief that everyone wants to hurt you. You'll be safe there. Lonely, but safe. Or you can try something terrifying, Eleanor said. You can try trusting that not everyone is Sarah or David. That some people might actually care about you, not your bank account. That life doesn't have to be a series of transactions and defensive maneuvers. James was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought she'd pushed too far. Then he spoke, his voice raw. What if I try and it fails? What if I let someone in and they betray me again? I barely survived it the first times, Eleanor. I don't know if I can. What if you don't try? Eleanor interrupted gently. And you survive another 20 years in that beautiful prison you've built, and you die having never really lived. Never trusted anyone? Never felt anything real? That's not fair, James said, but without heat. Life isn't fair, but it's short. And you almost ran out of it yesterday because you've been so busy protecting yourself that you forgot to take care of yourself. James stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the pond. Eleanor gave him space, watching him work through whatever storm was happening behind those gray eyes. When he finally turned back, his expression was unreadable. If I try this, whatever this is, I need you to promise me something. What? Be honest with me. Always. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. James's voice was intense. I can handle a lot of things, Eleanor, but I can't handle one more person lying to me. If you're going to be in my life, I need to know that what I see is what I get. Can you promise me that? Yes, Eleanor said without hesitation. Can you promise me the same? No hiding behind walls or corporate speak or whatever defense mechanism kicks in when you feel vulnerable. James actually smiled. That's a much harder promise. I know, but necessary. He walked back to the bench, sat down beside her, and took both her hands in his. Okay. I promise. Messy, terrifying honesty. God help us both. Eleanor laughed. This is either going to be a disaster or the first real thing I've experienced in years, James finished. They sat like that, hands clasped, until James's stomach growled audibly. Did you just eat 3 plates of pancakes 2 hours ago? Eleanor asked, incredulous. Apparently, actually tasting food makes you hungry again faster, James said sheepishly. Who knew? Come on, Eleanor said, standing and pulling him up. I know a place that makes sandwiches the size of your head. Is it another place where nothing costs more than $12 and the menu is laminated? James asked. Obviously. Perfect. They spent the afternoon as two people discovering each other, not Billionaire and housekeeper, but James and Eleanor. They ate sandwiches at a deli run by a family who'd immigrated from Vietnam 30 years ago. They browsed a used bookstore where James admitted he missed reading for pleasure, hadn't done it in years. Eleanor bought him a worn copy of East of Eden, insisting everyone should read Steinbeck at least once. What if I don't like it? James asked. Then we'll have our first real argument about literature, and it'll be magnificent, Eleanor said. They were walking back to her car, the afternoon stretching into early evening, when James's work phone, the one he'd left in the car but hadn't turned back on, finally wore down Eleanor's resolve. You should probably check that, she said reluctantly, just to make sure nothing's on fire. James looked at the phone like it was a snake. Then, with visible reluctance, he powered it on. The deluge was immediate. 73 missed calls. Over 200 emails. 17 voicemails from his assistant alone. James's expression shifted as he scrolled through messages, and Eleanor watched the man she'd spent the day with start to disappear behind corporate armor. There's a board meeting tomorrow, he said, voice distant. Emergency session about the merger. They moved it up because they couldn't reach me. Can someone else handle it? It's my company. You have a board, don't you? Vice presidents? People who are literally paid to handle things. James looked up at her, conflict written across his face. This is what I do, Eleanor. Who I am. I can't just walk away from responsibilities because I had a bad day. A bad day. Eleanor's voice sharpened. James, you had a cardiac event. You were in the hospital. This isn't playing hooky. This is medical necessity. I'm fine now. Are you? Eleanor challenged. Because from here, it looks like one phone call undid everything we talked about. Everything you promised. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure. You're right, Eleanor interrupted. I don't understand having billions of dollars or running companies. But I understand what it looks like when someone chooses the thing that's killing them over the thing that might save them. And I've seen that story before, James. I know how it ends. The silence between them was heavy. What do you want me to do? James asked, and there was real anguish in his voice. Walk away from everything I've built? Pretend none of it matters. I want you to delegate the meeting to your VP, Eleanor said. I want you to tell your assistant you're taking 3 days off, doctor's orders. I want you to choose yourself just once and see if the world actually ends. And if it does? Then you were right and I was wrong, and you can go back to your fortress and work yourself to death with a clear conscience, Eleanor said. But what if it doesn't? What if you take 3 days, and everything runs fine without you, and you realize you've been lying to yourself about how indispensable you are? James stared at her, then at his phone, then back at her. Eleanor could see the exact moment he made his choice. He started typing a message. What are you doing? Eleanor asked. Delegating, James said, still typing. Michael's been my VP for 6 years. He can handle the board meeting. Probably better than I could right now, honestly. James. I'm telling Janet, my assistant, that I'm taking a medical leave. 3 days, as ordered by my physician. He hit send, then looked at Eleanor. I'm terrified. Good, Eleanor said, smiling. That means it matters. James turned off his phone again, completely off, not just silenced. Now what? Now, Eleanor said, we figure out what the hell we're doing. Because I'm a housekeeper, you're a billionaire, and this is either the plot of a romantic comedy or a spectacular disaster in the making. Can it be both? James asked. With us? Probably. They drove back toward the city as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Neither of them addressed the obvious question, where James would spend the night. The estate felt wrong. His downtown apartment, full of work reminders, seemed counterproductive. You could stay on my couch, Eleanor offered finally, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. It's not much. Actually, it's kind of terrible. My apartment is basically a glorified closet, and my roommate has 2 cats who will absolutely judge you. But it's quiet. No one there knows you're James Blackwood. You'd just be James. James looked at her like she'd offered him something precious and fragile. Just James, he repeated. I'm not sure I remember how to be just James. Then it's a perfect time to learn. Eleanor's apartment was exactly as advertised, small, cluttered with the comfortable chaos of people actually living rather than existing. Her roommate, Marie, was a nurse who worked nights, so they had the place to themselves. The cats, Chairman Meow and Catrick Stewart, immediately approached James with the skeptical air of tiny furry judges. They're deciding if you're worthy, Eleanor explained, watching James awkwardly extend a hand to be sniffed. What are my chances? Depends. Are you a cat person? I've literally never had a pet, James admitted. My life hasn't exactly been conducive to taking care of another living thing when I can barely take care of myself. As if understanding this confession, Chairman Meow headbutted James's hand, purring. Patrick Stewart jumped into his lap with zero warning. Huh, Eleanor said. They like you. That's unusual. They usually hate everyone. Maybe they recognize a fellow commitment phobe, James said, carefully petting Patrick Stewart's head. Eleanor made tea, actual tea, not the expensive stuff James was probably used to, and they sat on her worn couch surrounded by cats and comfortable silence. Thank you, James said finally. For what? All of it. Saving my life. Forcing me to eat pancakes. Lying to hospitals. Adopting me like a stray cat who forgot how to be human. His smile was soft, genuine. For seeing something in me worth saving when I'd given up on that idea entirely. Eleanor set down her tea and took his hand again. James Blackwood, you listen to me. You are worth saving. Not because of your money or your companies or your influence. Because you're a human being who deserves to live, not just survive. And I think underneath all those walls and defenses, you're actually kind of wonderful. I'm really not. Shut up, Eleanor said gently. I'm not done. You're brilliant and funny and capable of deep feeling, even though you're terrified of it. You donated millions to build a park you never walked through. You kept your mother's recipe cards. You laughed at my terrible jokes and trusted me when you don't trust anyone. That's worth saving. You're worth it. James's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What if I mess this up? Whatever this is between us. Then you mess it up and we deal with it like adults. But you don't get to preemptively sabotage it because you're scared. Eleanor squeezed his hand. I'm scared too. You're the most complicated person I've ever met. But I think you're worth the complication. Even though I'm a disaster? Especially because you're a disaster. Perfect people are boring. James laughed through tears he didn't quite shed, and Eleanor thought that maybe, just maybe, the fortress was starting to crumble. Eleanor woke to the smell of burning toast and quiet cursing. She stumbled into her tiny kitchen to find James Blackwood, billionaire, tech mogul, man who probably had a private chef, staring at her toaster like it had personally betrayed him. It has settings, Eleanor said, trying not to laugh. You can't just jam the lever down and hope for the best. James turned, and Eleanor's heart did something complicated in her chest. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, slightly rumpled, his hair falling across his forehead without its usual styled precision. He looked real. Human. Beautiful in a way that expensive suits could never achieve. I was trying to make breakfast, he admitted sheepishly. As a thank you. For, everything. But apparently, I've forgotten how to operate basic kitchen appliances. When's the last time you made your own breakfast? James actually had to think about it. College? Maybe. Jesus. Eleanor muttered, taking over toaster duty. Okay, Blackwood. Cooking lesson 1. Toast doesn't require violence. It requires patience. They ate breakfast together, properly toasted bread with jam, scrambled eggs that Eleanor made while teaching James the basics of not burning things. It was domestic and strange and perfect. What happens now? James asked, finishing his coffee. I took 3 days off like you said. But then what? I can't just not go back to my life. No one's asking you to abandon your life, Eleanor said carefully. But maybe you could adjust it? Work fewer hours. Delegate more. Actually take weekends off occasionally? My company will survive, Eleanor interrupted. James, you built something incredible. You hired brilliant people. Trust them to do their jobs. Trust that the empire won't crumble if you're not personally holding up every pillar. James was quiet, processing. Then, what about us? Us. This. James gestured between them. Whatever we're becoming. You work for me, Eleanor. I'm your employer. That's complicated. It's incredibly complicated, Eleanor agreed. And probably a terrible idea by any rational measure. But I haven't felt this alive in years, Eleanor admitted. And I think you haven't either. So maybe it's worth being complicated and terrible and figuring it out as we go. James stood, crossing to where Eleanor sat. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle, tentative, like she might disappear if he held too tight. I don't know how to do this, he confessed. How to be with someone without waiting for betrayal. How to trust. How to be vulnerable without feeling like I'm handing someone a weapon to destroy me. Neither do I, Eleanor said honestly. But maybe we learn together? James kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise and terror in equal measure. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Okay, James said. We try this. But we do it right. Which means you can't work for me anymore. Eleanor's stomach dropped. What? Not like that, James said quickly. I mean, you're obviously welcome to stay in the position if you want, but it would be weird. Dating my housekeeper while she's my housekeeper. The power dynamics alone are a nightmare, Eleanor finished. Yeah, I see your point. So here's what I'm thinking, James said, and Eleanor could see his mind working through problems like he did in boardrooms. You said you were in nursing school before your father passed? 2 years completed. Had to drop out for financial reasons. What if you went back? Finished your degree? And before you protest about money, James held up a hand as Eleanor started to object. I have a foundation. The Blackwood Foundation. We give scholarships for exactly this kind of thing. You'd apply like anyone else, full transparency, but Eleanor, you'd be exactly the kind of candidate we look for. James, I can't accept. It's not charity, James interrupted. It's investing in someone brilliant who had to put their dreams on hold because the world is unfair. The foundation has given out 217 scholarships in the last 5 years. This would just be number 218. Eleanor felt tears prickling her eyes. Why are you doing this? Because you saved my life, James said simply. Because you're the first person in years who saw me as human instead of a walking bank account. Because you deserve to finish what you started. And selfishly, because I want you to be with me because you choose to be, not because you need the paycheck. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you'll let me help you the way you helped me. Say you'll give us a real chance without the complication of being employee and employer. Eleanor thought about her father, about his insistence on helping even when they couldn't afford it, about how she'd been too proud to accept it, and how that pride had cost her their last conversation. She thought about second chances and the strange ways life offers them. Yes, she said, on one condition. Anything. You actually take care of yourself. Doctor's appointments. Therapy, maybe to work through the trust issues. Actual vacations where you don't check your email every 5 minutes. You don't get to save me if you won't save yourself. James pulled her close. Deal. They spent the next 3 days in a bubble of their own making. James stayed at Eleanor's apartment, learning to navigate a life without servants or drivers or assistants. He grocery shopped for the first time in a decade, amazed that people just bought their own food. He learned to use the subway. He sat in a coffee shop without security and had a conversation with a stranger about nothing important. Eleanor introduced him to her world, her friends, her sister over video chat, the small rhythms of ordinary life. Hannah, predictably, was suspicious at first but warmed to James when he genuinely asked about her environmental work and didn't talk down to her. On the 3rd evening, they walked through the park again, the one James's money had built but he was only now experiencing. They sat on their bench, watching the sunset paint the sky. I've been thinking, James said, about the company, about my life. And I'm going to step back. Not completely, I'll stay as chairman. But I'm promoting Michael to CEO. He's wanted it for years, and honestly, he'd probably do a better job than me at this point. I've been holding on to control because I was afraid to let go, not because I needed to. Eleanor leaned into his shoulder. That's huge, James. It's terrifying, he corrected. But I think it's right. And I'm going to start a new project. Something smaller, more personal. Maybe tech for social good, programs to help kids from backgrounds like mine access education and opportunities. Your mom would have loved that, Eleanor said softly. Yeah, James agreed, his voice thick. Yeah, she would have. Months passed. Eleanor returned to nursing school, diving into her studies with renewed passion. James restructured his life, slowly dismantling the fortress he'd built around his heart. They navigated the strange waters of a relationship between two people learning how to trust again. There were hard moments, times when James's old suspicions flared up, when he pulled away because vulnerability felt like weakness. Times when Eleanor's pride made her push him away instead of asking for help. But they worked through it, with honesty, with patience, with the kind of stubborn determination that had brought them together in the first place. 1 year after the day Eleanor had removed his watch to save his life, James took her back to that same hospital. Not as patients, but as visitors. Why are we here? Eleanor asked as James led her through familiar corridors. He stopped at a door, the new cardiac care wing, state-of-the-art equipment, warm and welcoming design. A plaque on the wall read, "The Margaret Blackwood Memorial Wing, in loving memory of a mother who taught the importance of caring for others." You did this, Eleanor whispered. We did this, James corrected. Your idea about investing in healthcare access, my resources, Dr. Patel's expertise. This wing will provide care for patients regardless of their ability to pay. And there's a fund, anonymous, of course, to ensure no one has to choose between their health and their financial survival. Eleanor was crying now, full tears streaming down her face. James, my mother spent her last days in a hospital she could barely afford, James said quietly. I had all this money, all this power, but I couldn't save her. But maybe we can save someone else's mother, someone else's father. Maybe that's how we honor the people we've lost, by protecting the people who are still here. Eleanor threw her arms around him, and James held her tight, both of them crying now for loss and hope and the strange beauty of second chances. That evening, James took Eleanor to a restaurant. Not an expensive one, but the diner where they'd had their first real conversation. Rosie greeted them with her usual warm efficiency, and Dolores winked at Eleanor as she poured coffee. So, James said, his hand shaking slightly as he reached into his pocket. I've been thinking about trust, about how it's not something you have or don't have, but something you build. Every day in small ways. And I've been building it with you, Eleanor. For a year now. And I hope, you've been building it with me. He pulled out a small box and Eleanor's heart stopped. This isn't your watch, she said stupidly, and James laughed. No, it's not my watch. Though that's fitting actually because you removed my watch to save my life. And now I'm hoping you'll accept this to start a new one. With me. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, beautiful, but not ostentatious. An emerald, Eleanor's birthstone, surrounded by small diamonds. Eleanor Hayes, you saw past my walls when I'd convinced myself they were all I had left. You forced me to be human again. You taught me that trust isn't weakness and vulnerability isn't failure. You saved my life in that library, but more than that, you taught me that a life is worth saving. Will you marry me? Eleanor couldn't speak through her tears. She just nodded, over and over, until James slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. Rosie brought them champagne on the house. The other diners applauded. And Eleanor Hayes and James Blackwood sat in a vinyl booth eating pancakes and planning a future neither of them had thought possible. 2 years later, Eleanor graduated nursing school with honors. She started working in the cardiac care wing she and James had created, caring for patients with the same fierce dedication she'd shown that day in the library. James continued to work, but differently. He mentored young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. He donated not just money but time. He learned to delegate, to trust, to live instead of just existing. They got married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends, including Rosie and Dolores and Dr. Patel. Hannah was Eleanor's maid of honor. Michael, James's VP-turned-CEO, was his best man. James kept his mother's recipe cards in his office, but now he actually used them, cooking Sunday dinners with Eleanor in the kitchen of the modest house they'd bought together. Not the mansion, which James had converted into a community center and educational facility. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, James would watch Eleanor move through their home, and he'd remember that day in the library. How close he'd come to losing everything by trying so hard to protect it. How one person's courage and compassion had torn down his walls and shown him what life could be. "What are you thinking about?" Eleanor would ask, catching him watching her. "How you removed my watch to save me," James would say. "And how you've been saving me ever since." "We save each other," Eleanor would correct. "That's how this works." And James, who had once believed trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, would pull his wife close and think that she was right. They saved each other. Every single day. And it was more than enough.